me on that.
Morning, councillors. I declare the council meeting the 16th of December open. Welcome to our guests. I see Leon, we have on time from Audit New Zealand. But in order to start the meeting, I need to remind councillors and staff that this meeting has been live streamed, recorded, and the recording will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following this meeting. We also need to remind you and all those present, both in the chambers and on Zoom, that the local government decision making afford no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in the court of law and determined to be slanderous. We have an item in terms of the change of the order of business. Please note that the annual report, agenda item 9.2, will be covered after apologies to accommodate the availability of Audit New Zealand Director who has to leave at 9:45. So with that, do I have an opening karakia, please? Councillor White, please be upstanding.
E te atu nui tonu ko mātou inoi atu nei ki a koe. Ke tau mai te māramatanga ki a mātou whakatite mo tēnei rā. Ara hina hoki mātou e ki ai te oranga tonu ki ngā hutanga katoa. Ngā tanga ki tō mātou hoki whānui tonu. Amen. Almighty God, we ask that you give us wisdom in the decisions we make here today and give us guidance in working with our regional communities to promote social, economic, environmental, cultural well-being. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councillor White. Apologies. I've received apologies from Councillor Brunning and Councillor Rose is on leave. I don't think there are any further other apologies. I'll move to
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I did send you a message about.
Yes, but you're here.
Well, I'm here, but I was late.
That's all right.
Apologies for that.
So I'll move.
My apologies as
well. For early departure.
Departure was 4 hours.
Okay, thank you. And second by Councillor Thurston. Thank you. Right, that leads us to 9.2 annual report adoption and summary for 2021. It's been circulated, been on the agenda, moved up to agenda, as I said, to accommodate the availability of the external auditors. Welcome to Debbie Highland and our audit staff, Leon and Anton. Leading out.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, just on behalf of staff, we're really pleased to present the final version of the annual report for 2021. Obviously, the year has been quite extraordinary in respect of New Zealand's health and macroeconomic response in respect of the COVID-19 global pandemic. However, Council has been able to continue to remain focused on its core community outcomes, and it has achieved an 85% success rate in respect of its key performance indicators. We've delivered our work program through operating expenditure of 141.7 million and also capital expenditure of 27.6 million. We've delivered a surplus of 7.3 million as a result of significant capital revenue that has been achieved through central government to support again our resilience in respect of flood protection and control. I'm pleased to be joined by Leon, our Audit Director, and Anton, our Audit Manager. Since we presented the draft results to the Risk and Assurance Committee in October, we have been through a significant external audit, and I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Leon and Anton to deliver their audit opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie. Welcome again, Leon. The floor's yours.
Tēnā koutou katoa, Mr. Chair, councillors, and of course management and staff. Thank you very much for the opportunity to attend and especially for accommodating us, not only in timing, but also that we can do this via Zoom. As I've spoken to you quite a few times in the past, I thought it's best for Anton to speak today. So I'm going to make way for him to talk about our audit.
Yes, tēnā koutou everybody. To the Chair and Council, thank you very much. I'm very pleased today that we're coming with an unmodified audit opinion. Basically, the overall feedback is we think the audit has gone quite well. We've looked at, it's been a challenge, which I'll touch into now for both our staff and your staff, and we've worked very well together to get to this point. Events subsequent to balance date, please just consider if there's any significant events that have happened that are not already disclosed. These include legislative, contract or contractual compliances that may impact on the annual report. The overall control environment, we are satisfied with your overall control environment, which means it's effective for our audit purposes. During the audit, we did identify some improvements. However, we've also noted that a significant amount of previous recommendations have now been closed, about 78% of those. And this will be in the final report to the council. Some of the areas of audit focused, we've looked, there were a few property, plant and equipment revalued this year. This included land and buildings, maritime, lake restoration, and your river and drainage assets. We are satisfied that the revaluations have complied with the standards and the movements have been correctly accounted for. Also, the rivers and drainage valuation was effective 1 July 2020. So we just had to compare the carrying values at 30 June 2020 to the 1 July to make sure that there wasn't a significant movement, and we were satisfied with that. We also looked at for the past year that as at 30 June 21, that the fair value is not significantly different from the carrying value, and we're also satisfied with that. Land and buildings were completed at 30th of June. Just as a matter of interest, there's 2 of your buildings are actually revalued at as a commercial building, which is your Elizabeth Street and Key Street, and we're also happy with how that's all been done. The other area we looked at was a put option. This is quite a complicated valuation technique. Last year, we used Auditor's Expert to delve quite deep into the methodology of that. This year, we didn't use the expert, but we've made sure that the methodology had not changed, and we satisfied therefore that it's an appropriate valuation for that. We also had the Regional Infrastructure Fund. We just looked at any payments made during the year and whether that was in compliance with the intention of the fund, and we are satisfied that all payments made were appropriate for the fund. Consolidation, you have group accounts, which means your subsidiaries are also used not for profit. Subsidiaries used for profit accounting, and you use public benefit standards. So we just made sure any adjustments and consolidation were appropriately made, and we are happy with those. We also looked at any risk of management override of internal controls, and we are happy to say our testing found no areas of concern. Also, you're going to be signing a letter of rep by the chair and the chief executive. Just make sure you're comfortable that you've read it and understand everything in there. Also, if you're aware of any frauds, please, as a reminder, to just let us know about them. 2 areas that maybe we just want to draw some attention to. There were 2 prior period errors. One is from the Port of Tauranga, where it was identified in their equity accounting investees in terms of how those were revalued. This has now flowed up from the port all the way through to your accounts, the council accounts, and we're happy with how that has been adjusted. We found one other prior period error, which was just how the council classified a bond as a current liability, even though it should be a non-current because it's held to as a minimum until 20 October 2027. However, all the disclosures noting that is appropriate. The other area that was a challenge this year was the bus patronage performance measure. As you're aware, you've gone from an internally managed system to the regional integrated ticketing system. So we had to complete quite a bit of work around that to get comfort. One of that, we looked at what information the council's receiving from Otago Regional Council, who manages the regional integrated ticketing system on behalf of all the regional councils on it. We looked at some trend analysis over the past 3 years, looking at patronage and revenue trends. We also gained assurance over the accuracy of the fare rates that are preset in the system. We also confirmed there were no material variances in any of those reconciliations for your revenue per your Power BI, which is your business analytics program, and the bus fare revenue, and that what the expected revenue is in line with what is reported. We also eventually be able to gain some controls over the processes you have in place between the data that you get from the ticketing system, entirely correct. However, we do suggest going forward to reduce the amount of work that you get. It's called a Type 2 report, which is a controls report over risks in the regional integrated ticketing system themselves. We were actually quite close to potential qualifying, which Leon had mentioned in Audit and Risk Committee, but through this additional work, we've managed to get enough comfort that we could issue an unmodified clear opinion. So, so that's I think is a very good news story. And also just, I would like to again thank all the staff involved with that helped us and that we worked with through the audit. And I know this is Debbie's last meeting with us, and I just wanted to extend my thanks to Debbie. Over the years I've worked with her, and we've had a good working relationship where, you know, we didn't always agree on every point, but we made sure we could work to get to the right answer, and, you know, working between being very pragmatic and accepting and moving on. And I just want to wish Debbie all the best in the future. If there's any questions, Leon and I are available.
Thank you, Anton. So essentially the message to councillors, we've got an unqualified audit opinion. So in doing that, I'll move the adoption of the recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Seconder, Councillor Love. We're now open for discussion. Councillors, any questions in terms of the audit report to council on the annual report? Councillor Nees.
Mr. Chair, I wanted to mention some information and carry forward requests in the covering report, not the actual audit report. And when should I address that?
Now.
Well, firstly, I just wanted to congratulate staff on a very comprehensive and attractive document. Once again, we have not achieved our KPI for capital works. And I understand that we made significant savings throughout the year, and I really applaud staff for this. However, we've still got our perennial problem, and I do acknowledge COVID and the additional burden of a huge amount of work that we had on our program this past year. But we do have the same problem we've had in the past of quite a large capital program, which is not delivered for one reason or another. And we habitually compound this problem by carrying forward funds. So my concern is there's a table in the report which is asking for carry forwards across a range of activities. And in my opinion, this is too high level. I believe that council should have visibility of what capital project or work has not been achieved and why, and what amounts and why the carry forwards have been requested. And I also would like to understand a little bit more about the deliverability review that has been done, because we didn't deliver on a very large capital program, and with a carry forward of another 15 million, we are going to compound a big program for this current year. So what I'm seeking is for the relevant general manager or CE to assure us that before we approve this carry forward, that we will get the detail, and that the organisation does have the capacity to deliver the program as it is now recommended to be. My concern is that we will continue to have a bow wave of carry forward requests at the end of 2022. And I think we really need to get control of this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. I'll ask Ms. Hyland to respond to those
Thank
comments.
you. So through this long-term plan, Regional Council has delivered record capital expenditure. 3 projects in particular come to mind. The Kaituna River rediversion delivered to time, under budget, and to scope. The Kopiopio Canal remediation, similarly a significant outcome in respect of the canal, and also project upgrade, which has been a full refit. So the the significant capital works this year has been impacted partially by COVID and also because of the prioritisation of the 2017 flood repair project, another $50 million project that is largely being delivered in this particular year end. We are looking to carry forward through the long-term plan. We have developed through the asset management planning and infrastructure strategy work, a full program of work over the next 10 years. The $15 million that wasn't already factored into the LTP will initially land into this year's numbers. However, the annual plan information that we presented through the November workshop has also reprioritised some of that $15 million. Through our next Arotaki report, which will be in February 2022 or early March, we will be looking to bring the reprioritised capital works program to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
So can we see a detailed list, and has the organisation the capacity, the information we're going to receive in February, is that going to come with an assurance we have the capacity to deliver on all of the projects?
There has been through you, Fiona would like to respond.
Thank you, and good morning, councillors. We will be providing that information in the next Arotaki report, and it's not a matter of capacity so much. It's for each of, particularly the bulk of this is in flood protection and control, and there are lots of reasons why we are delayed in terms of those capital works. For example, in the Rangitaki spillway, we're in the detailed design stage for that. We do have to have consents. And so we can provide that information through our regular monitoring reports. But it isn't a matter of capacity. There are, as you have alluded to, Councillor Nees, there'll be various reasons for various projects in terms of why this is, the staff are seeking for this to be carried forward for this year.
Thank you, Fiona. Councillors, any other questions? If not, the resolution's been moved and seconded, so I'll put the resolution, which is outlined on page 3 of 9.2, page 3 and 4. So all those in favour, raise your right hand. Against? Carried. Thank you, Leon. I know that we're pushing you for time. Your oversight in terms of this audit is appreciated, and Anton, similarly. Look forward to seeing you again next year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
So, councillors, that takes us through to our public forum. I understand we've got Meg Collins. Looks like you're in Whakatane, Meg. Welcome. You haven't got Mike with you?
No.
Okay, floor's yours, Meg. Floor's yours, Meg. If you'd like to introduce the ladies with you, it'd be great.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Meg Collins tako ingoa. Welcome. It's really strange to be back in this building because, as many of you may not know, I was a councillor here from 1992 to 1998, and we met in this building. So this is a first for me to be on Zoom, and I'm finding it quite daunting. So what I want to talk to you today about is, can you start the show? We are, this is my friend, 2 friends here, Lynn and Kay from Ohiwa, and we have an issue in our area that we felt would come to the end of the line, so we will tell you about it. The area, and where do I point this? Oops, there. Sorry. technology, you're gonna do this. Just while she's sorting the slides out, my husband and I started the Aohiwa Reserves Care Group when we first moved to Aohiwa 21 years ago, and now there are 7 groups in the area. And a month or so ago, there was a meeting of all the care groups, and I was unable to go, but my friend Lynn here presented a letter at this care group expressing concern about an anomaly in the land and water plan to allow cows in drains. So the area that we're talking about is, this is Aohiwa Harbour Beach Road along, where's the point? Oh, there it is. No, it's not.
They won't be able to see.
Okay. So this is coming over Aohiwa Harbour Road, Aohiwa Beach Road is there, there's a farm on the right, there's the Waitahi River coming down there, and that's the Aohiwa estuary. This one. This is the Aohiwa Beach Road, you see the river on the left, farm on the right, which is owned by Philip Wilson, and this is the little bridge which carries the water from this farm into a little stream and out into the river. Next one. And this is the other way around, coming, looking at the other way, just to give you the picture. So on the 13th of October, it was a really high tide. The water was almost lapping the road. Next one. And I saw, this is an example of the high tide, very high tide. The water comes, the seawater comes up the river and almost overtops the road. Next one. Next one. Now this is the high tide in the drop and that technology. Sorry guys. No, I don't want that one, I want the drain. Oh. No, back. Now, forward. Next one. Okay, this is high tide. No, what was it jumping on? Okay, we have to be quick to see that. But at very high tide, the water comes up through from the sea, up the drain, and there's the outlet of the drain on that farm at low tide. And the previous tide, the water was above that drain. That drain actually drains all that area on that farm. Next. So this is the particular drain I was talking about, and under your land and water plan, you can, if you don't have standing water on your farm, you don't need to fence at both sides. On this particular day, and you can see the drain only fenced on one side, and on this particular day, there was no water in it. On this next slide, on the 13th of October, it was a very, very high tide. There was water in that drain. The water was just about over the road. It was coming up that stream, and the stream was backfilling into these drains, and the cows were in this paddock, and you can see they have access to the drain. You can see right up there the cows were in the drain. So that is the crux of my talk today. There's an anomaly in your plan, and what we are asking for, that you change the land water plan to make all internal fences on drains, whether they've got water or not, to be double fenced. This particular farmer is the only one in the district that doesn't double fence its drains. Now, I have spoken to the pollution hotline, Dairy New Zealand, Fonterra, the staff on the ground at the regional council, and they all said the same thing, that the buck stops with the regional council because under the plan this is permitted. Now we have written to Mr. Wilson, asking him to fence all his drains here, and his reply, and in his reply it says here, I'd like to point out that this particular drain This compliance regulation set down by EBOT. It was inspected and told because it does not have a continuous flow of water, it did not need to be fenced. However, at these very, very high tides, when the water is back flowing from the river and into these drains, and you've got the cows there at the same time, there's effluent going down and it goes into the pippy beds. Now that is another issue. At the moment, the pippy beds are okay, so I checked, but very often the Ministry of Fisheries and the Ministry of Health, the E. coli counts, and it's closed. And it's a very, very important part of the Kaimoana in the district. The locals do not take pippies from the Waikato pippy beds, they go around the corner. And as this is one of the few estuaries, pristine estuaries left in the Bay of Plenty, it's really beholden to you to change this anomaly. And another point that I picked up by talking to one of the staff, there are 28 monitors down the stream from the top of the Waikato River all the way down to here, to this farm, and this farm has at least E. coli counts. So that is really the crux of what I'm here today, to point this out, to put somehow in the system that it has to be changed. The lady from Dairy New Zealand said 95% of waterways, this is for dairy cows, have been fenced, and there's a small 5% left. And let's block that rule that can only be fenced on one side. So, Lynn, perhaps you might like that.
Sure. Kia ora koutou, my name is Lynn Hickney. I live in Ohiwa as well and often drive past that area. I've also got a rural revegetation business where I plant native trees along stream edges, like what this one should be. And what I have to say is that there is no denying that human practices have heavily impacted on the environment. We'll take many small and large actions to reverse these impacts so all beings can thrive on this planet. We ask of you to be part of the solution by making this small change in the Regional Council Land Water Plan rules. You need to stop cow effluent going directly into waterways. You need to reduce the harmful effects of high E. coli, nitrate and phosphorus levels have on all beings that rely on clean water for survival. And you can do this by ruling that all dairy cows are excluded from watercourses, regardless of width, standing water or not standing water. Thank you.
And my name is Kay Hitchcock, and I live just around from this road on Ohiwa Beach Road as well, and often driving past there and seeing the cows there. This river is really an important river, and the fact that the other farmers up the river are doing such a good job, it's really disappointing that this one farmer is sticking to your rules, and as a consequence, the river is polluted from time to time. And I'm just supporting you and asking you to change those rules so that the farmer here needs to change his fences and put up new fences to stop this pollution.
There's just one thing I'd like to add. In 1993, was a late Greg Pemberton at a council meeting. I suggested that all fences be on farms, on dairy farms all drains, streams and rivers on dairy farms be fenced. And I was held down. It was just totally impossible and you couldn't do it. So we have moved on a lot since 1993. But we actually did it on our own farm because we had cows going into a small stream. We fenced it up, and you should see it now 25 years later, and it looks amazing. So, yeah, I'd just like to bring it to your attention. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Meg. Just before I open it to questions, could I acknowledge the enthusiasm and the passion that you in particular and your care group colleagues have in terms of protecting the taio, especially around this Ohiwa headland. Very much appreciated. As you said, you've been a long-term advocate for environmental issues, having sat in the regional council forum. I'll ask the Chief Executive to just quickly go through the relationship between the changes expected in the NPSFM fresh water and where the changes to our regional land and water plan will start to take effect. Fiona.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. Yes, this is very frustrating, and you are absolutely correct. That is a permitted activity at the moment because there is no flow in those drains at all times. With the NPSFM, the council's bringing in a regional plan change where there will be specific rules in regards to these activities where there is currently not a flow at all times. Very happy to go and talk to you more about this as well, and also visit the farmer in question. Currently, the plan is to have that rule in place by 2024.
Too late, it's tomorrow.
Right, thanks, Fiona. Councillors, any questions of Meg? Appears not, Meg. So once again, thank you very much. Thanks for your time and travelling from Ohiwa to the offices in Whakatane. Much appreciated. And yes, we did miss you at the Christmas function.
I'm normally.
Thank you, ladies. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
So, councillors, that takes us through to item 4, items not on the agenda. And as you well know, the following new report is to be added into the agenda. So that is to establish a Waiapiri Regional Council, Tauranga City Council Joint Committee. I'll move to accept the inclusion of this report on the agenda. Do I have a seconder? Councillor White. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you. So number 5, order of business. There will be no change to the order of business apart from that late item. Number 6, declarations of conflict of interest in relation to today's agenda. Mr. Crosby.
Thank you, Chair. 9.7, Quayside Statement of Expectation.
Likewise, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So we've conflict noted from Councillor Crosby and Councillor White as directors of Quayside. Thank you, gentlemen. Public excluded business to be transferred into the open. There is none. So that takes us through to the minutes. Can we confirm the minutes of the Regional Council meeting on the 10th of November? Which are on page 10 of your agenda. We have a mover. Moved Councillor Winters, seconded Councillor Neves. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Right, any matters arising from those minutes? Appears not. That takes us through to 8.2, Regional Council minutes of the 2nd of December. I'll move they be adopted. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Thurston. All those in favour of adoption, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you. Any matters arising out of those minutes? Appears not. Minutes to be received. 8.3, Ohiwa Harbour Implementation Forum minutes. Councillor Eatey, prepared to move. Councillor Eatey moves. Councillor Clark, second. Councillor Clark is second. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Any matters arriving out of those minutes or anything you want to add, Councillor Eatey, Councillor Clark? If not, we'll move on. 8.4, Tomato Kaituna River Authority minutes of the 27th of August. We have a mover. Councillor Neves. Councillor McDonald, seconder. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you. Any matters arising, either Councillor McDonald or Councillor Neves wants to raise? Appears not. Thank you. Rangitoki River Forum minutes of the 3rd of September.
So move.
Moved Councillor Clark, Councillor Winters. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against, carried. Any matters arising from those minutes or anything you want to add, Councillor Clark, Councillor Winters? And that takes us through to reports. Agenda item 9.1, which is the chairperson's report. So it's on page 53 of your agenda. I'll move the chairperson's report. I have a seconder, Councillor Thurston. All those in favour, raise your hand of adoption of that report. Against, carried. Just before I come to Councillor Thompson and Councillor Nees, I'll ask the Chief Executive, who was present at a presentation at the regional sector in terms of Dr. Caroline Reid, Chief Executive Overseer, to give us a quick précis on an issue in terms, I think, which was really quite important. It's the first time we've heard it enunciated by the Chief Executive of Overseer Limited in regard to the regulatory relationship with Overseer as a regulatory tool. Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. So you'll recall that over the next few months, work has been done in terms of the applicability of Overseer as a regulatory tool, and that's been led by MPI and MFE, and we're involved with that. There's two key work streams that are progressing at the moment. One is looking at a risk management tool, a new tool to be introduced to support rules in land and water plans. And the second one is looking at whether the materiality of the issues that Overseer that came up through a scientific review of Overseer can be addressed. The CEO of Dr. Caroline Reid has talked about Overseer no longer being a tool in terms of supporting regulatory rules, but instead focusing on a farm management tool. There are a few months to go through in terms of the future of Overseer, but it's very clear that work is required over the next few months to enable us to continue with our rules. We have asked and we are being considered in terms of looking at the Lake Rotorua catchment as an area where the materiality issues raised in that scientific report with Overseer can be piloted and looked at to see if they're material or not. Clearly, this will be something that comes back to you over the fullness and times in terms of there was a commitment by July next year to have regulatory tools in place to support the rules in the regional land and water plans. I think the key thing the chairman wanted to highlight was that Overseer Limited is seeing the future of their tools being more as a farm management tool rather than a regulatory tool.
Thank you, Fiona. So, Councillor Thompson? No, Councillor Nees, then Councillor Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was that two matters I wanted to ask about. One was this one. So the way forward is not necessarily for any work or workarounds to be done on the Overseer tool, but a new tool to be developed?
So both of those are occurring. There's two different work streams. So workarounds on the Overseer tool, but also a new risk management tool. And we have staff involved in both those work streams that are being led by MPI.
Excellent. Well, I'm not sure whether Councillor Winters wants to talk about Overseer. I'm quite happy to wait for my other issue if he wants to follow on.
Councillor Winters, is it Overseer?
Thank you, Jane. Morning, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Fiona, and really good that you put Lake Rotorua catchment up as a pilot study. Good to hear. My concern is, is there a new tool in the meantime? Because I'm concerned that as a regulator, paying out a lot of money through our nutrient buying of nitrogen, what if the question is, if we've got it materially wrong in those purchases that we've done, and we know there are a lot of purchases coming up in the pipeline, and we had a brief discussion with Rosemary Cross last week in terms of what's in the pipeline. There are farmers coming forward now. When do you flick from one to the other in terms of this new system? Because I'm concerned if we get it materially wrong, who's going to pay the difference?
So I can assure you, Councillor Winters, it's not materially wrong, and currently through the Environment Court, it's been proven that overseer can work for Plan Change 10, and the way that it is included in our rules there enables us to move with different iterations of overseer. So that is all good and well. In the Hawke's Bay, they are trialling a different risk management tool, so that's wonderful for us to hear. And we are hoping to have an answer by July next year in terms of those tools that are available. It may take a wee bit longer than that, but that's certainly what MPI are working towards. We're very, very pleased, as you have said, that we are getting a number of incentive scheme purchases coming through. In fact, we're having a bumper year or a stellar year, and really, really pleased with that. But it's work as in progress, business as usual for us in terms of our regulatory tools and settings around late Rotorua.
Councillor Nees. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, on the 3rd of November, you had a meeting with Poroto Naropo with the Mayor of Western Bay and Commissioner Tolley to discuss tangata whenua representation. Could you give us a summary of the outcomes of that meeting, please?
Sure. So the initiative of having a hui with Poroto and his mother was that his mother has a long history in the Bay of Plenty Health Board, Aura area. And many years ago, to get a representative group of Māori, iwi or hapu, whichever term you'd like to use, to represent the views of Māori in the Bay of Plenty Health Board, she was at the leading edge of putting together and formalising that representative group. So it was a hui to discuss how she actually achieved that going forward, and then was there the opportunity in terms of the wider Bay of Plenty currently, much in line with the work that Councillor White is doing of trying to get a vehicle in terms of not only the Three Waters Reform Entity B, but also wider RMA issues in terms of getting that leadership in a Māori leadership issue to represent the Bay of Plenty. So the initial meeting we had, he went away to do some more work. We haven't had another meeting since that time, but that's the background to it. So it's essentially trying to draw on his mother's experience. Amahairi, I think her name is. Yeah, Amahairi, which being on the health board at the time was a good outcome and probably a difficult period as well. Anything else, councillors? If not, it's been moved and seconded, hasn't it? Yeah, voted on it? Sorry? Yeah, it's been adopted though. Okay, I'll put it, so it's been moved to second the adoption of the Chair's report. All those in favour raise your hand. Thank you. Against, carried. That takes us through to 9.3, revised community participation plan. We have Stephanie McDonald and Kieran Miller with us. Welcome, Steph.
Tēnā koe, Chairman, and morena koutou, councillors. I'm Steph McDonald, the Community Engagement Team Leader, and as you mentioned, I'm here to speak to item 9.3, the revised Community Participation Action Plan. It's on page 56 of your agenda. As requested, this document sets out the aspirations and actions to lift community participation across council, with a focus on community engagement, volunteers, funding and democracy. Following our council workshop held on the 23rd of November, staff have revised the action plan to better reflect your aspirations, and today we're seeking approval from council for this revision. I will attempt to share my screen. Please bear with me. One moment. I think that's not what I'm after. Is that appearing as it should to other people?
Not quite, Steph, that we can see all your speaking notes, which is fine.
Excellent. It'll be like a read-along storybook, my apologies. We've been through a process over the last few months to develop this action plan, and we're looking to coordinate actions from across service plans across council, and these are some of the key milestones. So since those impact statements were drafted in July, we've established an internal network, we've had councillor briefings and feedback from councillors. The draft was presented in October, and we've had our workshop with Anne Patillo. Do my best to see if I can switch that presentation format. The key revisions we have made have been around engagement, focusing on proactive tools to reach a wider audience, recognising the complexity of our issues, so that you've got feedback that you can trust. And we also want to strengthen councillor participation and engagement. In terms of democracy, there's a real focus on voter participation. And as a document itself, we had some really useful feedback to ensure there was a clearer structure, good hierarchy in the document. We've also added a recognition of digital engagement as a significant transformational shift for ourselves and for the community, and a focus to stay in our lane in terms of the engagement led by Regional Council. We have a number of actions already underway. Participate Bay of Plenty is our online engagement platform that was launched earlier this year. We've had more than 26,000 visits from more than 18,000 visitors and more than 1,600 contributions to more than 20 projects. And we have a number lined up for the new year. We have our youth involvement project, which we mentioned at Committee Māori earlier in the week. That program has launched, and it's really exciting to see the progress they've made already. There will be an opportunity for councillors to meet with this group in the new year. We have refreshed some of our e-newsletters with a real focus on the work streams within the Community Participation Action Plan. Our first one went out earlier this week. In terms of the Environmental Enhancement Fund, that's fully subscribed for the year with 17 applications seeking over $300,000 already received. 13 of these projects have been approved, and there's still 4 remaining that are under assessment. And we have a participatory budgeting trial that's being prepared to launch to the public in February. And at this stage, as you'll have seen from my notes, I'd like to invite Kieran Miller, who's new in our team, to outline the planned trial of the participatory budgeting. Kieran, I'll see if I can fix up my presentation while you do that.
Thanks, Steph. Kia ora all. My name's Kieran, and I'm an advisor in the community engagement team here at the Regional Council. So this is a new tool that we haven't used before. It's called Participatory Budgeting, and it's something that we'd like to set up a trial project. So we're in the early stages of it at the moment. Can you go back one slide, please, Steph, if you can? So it involves setting up a new fund for 30K, and it's directed towards schools to apply for funding between 1 and 5K for projects related to hazards resilience and sustainability. So the types of projects that we're sort of anticipating with this fund will be, it might be edible gardens at schools, at a particular school, or it might be a school that looks to establish or erect new tsunami evacuation signs or something like that, or potentially setting up a new bike rack or constructing a new bike rack to promote cycling and reduce emissions. So how it works is that schools apply for funding, and they go into a participatory budgeting section. I'll show you an example of it soon. But the way it works is that the public essentially votes on which projects that they think should be voted and should receive funding. So it's split up between the public voting. They'll have 20K to vote on different projects submitted from schools. And then our youth participants from our YIP program are also going to get 10K to vote on whatever projects are remaining that weren't successful during the first round of public voting. So I'll attempt to share my screen and give you an overview of the tool that we're looking to use.
Much more successful. Thank you, Kieran.
So this is an example of what it could look like. So this is a tool that we have on our Participate page, but one that we haven't used yet. So in this example, the community has 300K to spend. So a registered user would come on to Participate, and they would select which projects they feel should be prioritised and funded by the council. So in this instance, they might like to fund this street playground. And as you can see, once you've funded the playground, then your budget goes down to 200K. They might like some community arts. So there we go, we'll fund that. And so you work through the projects until you've reached your budget. And you can, if you find something that you'd like to fund, maybe you want smart bins. So, okay, I'll get rid of the tree planting and I'll use the smart bins. And then you submit your vote. And so whatever projects receive the most votes will receive the funding. So as mentioned before, 20K is for the public to vote. So that'll be anyone can come on and vote for any of the school projects. And then 10K will be for the youth participants to vote. And that's it creates, trying to take away some of the bias there with larger schools having potentially more of an outreach than smaller schools. And that's our trial project, which is also part of our an item in our action plan. So in terms of timing of this project, we're working on it at the moment, and we're ideally roll it out, or the application fund will be open for schools to apply, ideally in term 1 at the start of next year. We're voting following that, and we'll look to wrap up the funding aspect by mid next year.
Thank you, Kieran. Through you, Mr. Chair, would welcome any questions.
Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Kieran. Councillors, as you know, you've had the opportunity after the first draft of this to feed back into it. So this is the final document for your approval, as Steph has said. Any questions, Councillor Crosby?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Stephanie. Just with regard to the action plan and items, particularly 21 and 22 the 22 elections, can I just draw your attention to what's called Vote 22? And this is a collaboration between Taituroa, which was formerly Solgum, and LGNZ. And you just might want to have an overview of that, so there could be a degree of consistency of messaging, because what could happen is multiple messages to the electors and voters could be confusing. So just take that opportunity, please, to consider that.
Well, through you, Chair, thank you. I'm aware that we did have staff attend a webinar last week on that one, so we'll join the dots as best we can. Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank staff for the time and effort that they put into refining this document. I think it's very cohesive and easy to read, and it now provides a very good picture of what we aspire to and what we will do. So I sincerely thank you for the work that you've put in. With regard to the participatory budget trial, that is very exciting. Can it be used to also prioritise lists of projects? For example, I presume we will get a list, some breakdown that said that these ones are the projects that received the most votes. But does it enable us to do some analysis around perhaps potential gaps of what we're doing in the future, so that it's a really useful tool, quite apart from the funding of specific projects, but also to get a litmus test on what things the community is wishing to support?
Through you, Chair, I absolutely think we could look at the data that we get to see where the priorities are for community. We'll see who is voting for what projects as well. So we might be able, depending on the numbers, if it's statistically valid, we'll be able to look and see what's a priority in the Western Bay or the Eastern Bay, or for younger communities or for Māori. So hopefully we're really popular and we have great data to share back with you.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to echo Councillor Nees's thanks to the staff, particularly you, Steph. Thank you so much for all of the work that you and your team have put into this. I can't begin to tell you just how thrilled I am that we've finally arrived at this point in time, which I think is a real turning point. I have a question to you, Fiona, and for some considerable time, I've been banging on about the idea of storyboards. Storyboards that tell the environmental stories of our public spaces. And I'm very conscious that when I walk around our reserves, we've got signs up saying alligator weed, beware. But it's not the kind of stories that are encouraging people to take the kind of, develop a real relationship with their environment, particularly wildlife and environmental stories. I believe we could do this in partnership with mana whenua and TLAs across the region. So a long preamble to my question, how does this idea get anywhere?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Absolutely, we're looking at storyboards. We're working with community care groups and, as you said, with mana whenua and TLAs. What we'll do is bring a report back to you in terms of where they are in the region and the plans for that.
Thanks very much, Fiona. Thank you, and thanks, Steve.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, kia ora, Steph. First to Paula, interesting enough, your case about the good news stories. Had a conversation just last week with our comms people about doing a series of good news stories around environmentalism funded by the Regional Council next year, and looking happy to be part of that. Steph, yeah, really approve of what you've done in terms of participatory democracy. Great stuff, but also really quite fascinated to see our EEF fund fully subscribed this term, only maybe 5 months into it, whereas last year we were significantly undersubscribed. It would be good to have some feedback on how all that happened, but also I do recall making a request to EEF fund people if we could see a copy of the applicants, because in that context it would give us an idea about what projects are out there, and maybe even be able to contact those people so that their ideas can be socialized. So if you could accommodate us with that, that would be marvelous. But well done. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. We'll take that one on board and come back to you later.
Mr. Chair.
Councillor White.
Yeah, look, I'd just like to endorse congratulations for what I consider to be a very inclusive community engagement report, very inclusive across the whole spectrum of our community. So congratulations for achieving that. And Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the receipt of this report.
Thank you, Councillor White. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Winters. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favour, raise your hand on Zoom. Against? Carried. Well done, Steph. The accolades certainly flowed today for you, didn't they? Job well done.
I'll pass them on to the team. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Kieran.
Thank you, team.
Councillors, 9.4 review of navigation safety bylaws. So you will note this paper, welcome Tony, this paper essentially outlines the proposed timeframes for a review process. And in the appendices there, you'll find some of the technical issues that they want to address. And just to start the debate, I suppose John's with us, is he? Oh, he's on leave. Can one of you ladies tell us what are hot works operations?
Through you, Chair, hot works is just when you're doing things like welding in the marine environment.
Oh, okay. Why didn't you say welding? Okay, hand it over to who's running this, Tony or Sarah?
Good morning, councillors. Hopefully you can hear me. So today we're bringing you just an outline paper, though it is fairly chunky, about the proposed timeline and process in which we undertake the next review of the NAV safety bylaws, and hopefully get your agreement with that plan and timeline. So I'm going to take the paper as read. In in essence, we are proposing a reasonably long time frame for this project because of some of the legacy issues that have been within this bylaw for some time. We want to take the approach that we do a reasonable amount of pre-engagement before our formal process in order to really understand community impact and sentiment, and then maybe propose some alternatives to some of the current ways of managing these legacy issues. So the paper kind of is self-evident on our plan and some of those legacy issues. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Tony. Councillors' questions. So we've got Councillor Love, McDonald, and then I'll do the Zoom. Councillor Love.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember the debate we had on this some time ago around the table. And what transpired at the time was that there was really no alternative for water skiing for the amount of space that was required in the harbour. And the great problem in the harbour is the inflow and outflow of water is so rapid that it precludes the ability to ski anywhere else effectively. So nothing has changed since the last time we reviewed the matter. So why does it need to be reviewed again?
So Tony, essentially the question is, why are we, or Sarah, why are we reviewing the technical aspects of this? Some of it been done historically.
Through you, Chair. It's a good point, but in the last review of the bylaws, the commissioners were really clear that there were a significant number of matters that needed to be addressed and resolved before the next review. So in essence, we were given an action plan that we had to look to, and you'll see that appendix number 1 on page 88, there is a table at the end of that appendix that sets out what the commissioners required the regional council to do and then come back with to be reconsidered. Part of that is getting some detailed information about the use of those areas to map out in detail what the ski areas may or may not look like, and get some real data on the numbers used and the safety matters involved. So that's one of the key parts of the review that we have committed to and that we are undertaking at the moment. And as Tony has set out in her paper, we are working with tangata whenua on gathering a lot of that data. But there are also just some really minor technical matters that the Harbour Master team believe need to happen regardless of those larger issues that we are going to need to consider anyway.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor McDonald.
Kia ora, Sarah. I know you've covered off in mentioning about Matakana Island and Motuhua Island, so really I'm just really want to reiterate the importance of making sure that we're having those early conversations with the residents of Matakana and Motuhua. I'm going to take up a conversation myself of where things left off for them, and maybe I have a sit down with you two around hoping to get to some place where we can resolve some of those outstanding issues. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Yeah, kia ora, Tony, Sarah. I'd like to put some context on the proposed Tarawera review. It's quite intriguing. January this year, there was an annual jet boat run up the Tarawera River. It happens once a year, but not necessarily at that time. A citizen became irate when they went past some kids swimming in the river, quite justifiably, posted it on Facebook. And as a result of that single posting on Facebook, a number of Kareao citizens ran in to the regional council and posted complaints. And all of a sudden it became from an isolated one-off incident into constant jet boat usage, which is totally not the case. And I just think we need to be careful that we read into what the realities of it was. In that context, I rang Mayor Campbell this morning, who's also a jet boater, and he just asked, please, could he be included in the review to give a perspective on that, to make sure that, you know, it is fit for purpose. So thanks for that, guys. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Winters.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Tony, for the report. Very comprehensive. And Mr. Chairman, I'm reminded of the Rivers and Drainage Bylaw review we did. We had a subcommittee of councillors who got into real detail of the issues of the Rivers and Drainage Bylaw review, chaired by Councillor Von Danielson. Tony mentioned commissioners last time. Are we looking to have councillors on a hearings bylaw panel like we did for the River and Drainages review? And a second question is, if we are having councillors, can we request a site visit to Hunters Creek? I know the lay of the land there, but to see it in the flesh or from, I don't think you can do justice from land, but a site visit to Hunters Creek, because I think we haven't got it right there. And there's some legacy issues there, but it's just those two requests, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Message ends.
Sarah, response?
Through you, Chair, we can provide a paper back to council on options for commissioners versus subcommittee. We had intended to do that a bit further into the process, but if you would like to do that sooner rather than later so that you can start considering some of these issues and having those field trips, we can certainly bring that to the first council meeting in the new year.
Sooner rather than later, okay. Please, Sarah. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With your indulgence, I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, I see that one of the recommendations was possibly designating swim areas, specifically mentioned with respect to the Hunters Creek area. Is it intended then that we look at designated swimming areas across the rest of the region? Because that is quite a significant change, I would think, for navigation safety bylaws, but there might be some areas where that might be advisable, where there is conflict of use. So that's one question. Another question is, we do now, our legislative framework or operating environment has changed. So we have co-governance entities now, and we have the Te Maro o Kaituna on the Kaituna River, and we have a river document. So what weight is the Te Maro Kaituna and the river document going to have in this process? And similarly, we have the advisory group in Tauranga Moana. Mm-hmm. And the one other thing that comes to mind is the Maka judgment over Rangatahi Bay, which gives iwi a right of veto, but over consents, not over rules. But this is what we're looking at now. So there are a number of things that have changed that we'll have to turn our mind to. So that's another issue. And then lastly, we're talking about having tangata whenua in monitoring, but we do have harbour wardens out and about all the time. Are we gathering data from them and integrating that into our analysis as well?
Okay, so answering the three questions. Simple one is, yes, we are getting the harbour wardens to also undertake monitoring this summer and next summer as proposed. So it's not just one-off or small groups doing monitoring, it's all of the maritime staff and the wardens as well. The conflict of use with the swimming, and I guess this is part of the reality of the increase in use of some of our open spaces, particularly around water. And like you say, the sometimes negative effects it has on different groups. And this is something that we will be looking at in the analysis of whether we designate special areas for swimmers or not. And I guess to go back to Councillor Clark's point is along the Tarawera River is that we need to take into account stakeholder feedback, but also what it boils down to is the integrity of the bylaws for the equity across the number of users that we have within the bounds of the regulations we use. So there'll be careful analysis done around the current climate of users and the impact that a lot heavier use has on the current bylaws. And to answer the question about the engagement with Te Mara o Kaituna and the Tauranga Moana Advisory Group, we've actually quite a large range of key stakeholders, and they are included in that. So we will be engaging and working with them and gaining their feedback as well in the whole process in the areas where it does affect them and possibly their official documents and action plans.
Thank you. And our legal advice about the MACA judgment and its potential impact on our navigation safety bylaws.
Yeah, so we've already flagged that, and the legal team are looking into the impact that some of the current court outcomes have already had an impact, and what is likely to happen in the future and how that affects the bylaws, particularly in Tauranga Harbour at the moment. But what about other areas as well?
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Von Duddleson.
Yes, just to support Councillor Winters, I'm a strong advocate, and this is going right across our region, and it's really important that whoever's the hearing commissioners on this has a very is engaged with our community and is getting it understands the issues in detail. This is a very sensitive area, but that doesn't mean we have to abscond from our responsibilities as regional councillors. And so I'd strongly recommend that we actually keep it in-house. I was the chair of the 204 hearing, and that again was very sensitive, but we actually worked through the process and got a satisfactory outcome. Might not be appropriate still today because things change and communities change, but Councillor Thompson's often talked about participatory democracy, and this, I don't want someone from Auckland or Hawke's Bay telling us how to organise our community engagement, and so I just urge you to actually think very carefully before you employ non-regional hearings commissioners. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well said, Councillor Von Duddleson. I can't think of an issue that most of us aren't desperately passionate about. The Tauranga Harbour is the backdrop to Tauranga residents' everyday life. I mean, it's just part and parcel of who we are. So 2 points I'd like to make. One, I don't think the co-governance entities should be treated as stakeholders. I think they need to be right in the mix in terms of this process. And I'd like to suggest that sub-regional subcommittees actually be involved in terms of working this matter up. I certainly don't want to delegate the responsibility to people who don't live here and, enjoy this magnificent environment every day. So I'm looking at a sort of a sub-regional subcommittee type grouping of councillors together with co-governance entities and others to work up the issues. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Trust you'll take that last comment in terms of sub-regional groupings to inform the ultimate hearing panel. It's got a lot of merit.
Happy to move
Anything else?
resolutions
Oh,
1 and
Councillor
2 on
McDonald.
18.
Sorry, Councillor Winters?
Oh, happy to move resolutions on page 80.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'll take you as a mover. Councillor McDonald.
Just a heads up to staff, just taking on board what Councillor Nees has raised about those other considerations. And I just want to go back to around the matter around the MACA and specifically what's happened with the Tahuna or Rangatawa. Now, one of the things I want to give you a heads up, which may affect the current ski lanes that we have that run in Matapiti. The boundary line of the Tahuna has actually moved so that what has happened now, it is encompassed within the boundary of that MACA application. So, I'm just giving you a heads up that that may have implications. I don't think huge, but I think it now means a conversation with those collective hapu that are tied to that MACA application. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. So the recommendation on page A1 has been moved by Councillor Winters. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Love. No further discussion. All those in favour of the adoption, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. So we'll adjourn for 15 minutes. So those on Zoom can charge a coffee pot, and those on the council, we can retire to the councillors' room. So we'll reconvene at right. Welcome back, councillors. So that takes us through to agenda item 9.5, consent processing consultants. Sarah, are you doing this? Or I see we got Matt with us as well. Matt was the author of the paper, I think.
Yes.
Where you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Morning koutou. So this paper is just seeking to continue the arrangement we have around having a number of consultants on hand to process resource consents for us on our behalf. And there's two reasons for that. One is to manage our capacity and ensure we can meet capacity to meet our timeframes, and the other part is to manage conflicts of interest. So I'm happy to take the paper as read and answer any questions.
Good, thank you very much, Matthew. So I will start questioning. I will start asking a question. As one who has to apply for and utilise consents, I think I'm going to say something else, but I think the material issues here are the following. One, where does the accountability sit and to whom? The second is, and it relates to accountability as well, in terms of where does the invoice sit relative to the organisation and the client? And the other one is, if the client is expected to pay these fees, does the client have a choice in terms of the selection of the deliverables?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess so to answer the first question, so the accountability still sits with the resource consents manager, so that's Ruben. So even though a consultant will process these consents, they still come back to Ruben or one of our seniors, our principal advisors or seniors, to sign off, and at that point they approve the costs. In terms of your question around applicants having the choice whether these go out to consultants or whether we're processing them internally, our preference is to process them internally where we can, but the variance of when applications come in and depending on our staff's workload kind of determines whether they go external or internal. If we have a specific request to keep them internal, we'll try and meet that where we can, but that's not always the case.
Okay, thanks for that, but I suppose to drill down a little bit more, if I'm an applicant, I've got a choice that I can use the regional council resource, either in-house or allocated, or I can employ my own consultant to liaise with the regional council. Is that right?
So This is in relation to us processing the resource consents. So that's slightly different to applicants employing a consultant to prepare their consent application for us, if I understood that question correctly.
Okay, well, I'll move on. Councillor Von Duddleston and Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have been a bit amazed at how often we do use consultants, and I understand the workload issue for our staff, but one thing I learnt and decided to do in the very, very early days of being a hearings chair was to write my own consents, and I think that has stood me in good stead, and I think we should be recommending it to our chair people who, if they're doing consents, to actually write, because it says that write their own decisions. Basically, yes, you get a peer reviewed by your staff, and you get help from staff, but that will cut a lot of the cost out. It's a lot cheaper for a council to use in-house rather than consultants, and to say that well, we don't pay anyway, the applicant does. I think that's actually a shocking statement. We don't want to include that, because we have to be always mindful of the customer, and the applicant is our customer. So I'm one who favours greatly keeping it in-house where possible, and there are some instances with conflicts of interest that you can't do that, and I understand that, and that's absolutely okay to pull a consultant in where there are conflicts of interest, and it can't be seen to be done fairly for the applicant. But otherwise, I think this council, and who knows what will happen going forward, but it is full of our 14 councillors. You know, we've got lots of ex-mayors. We've got a huge capacity within our council who understand our community, who have got the skills and attributes to be able to be really good hearing commissioners and hearing chairs. And I think we've now caught up the backlog, and so I understand the reasoning before, if we were behind to get us up to scratch. But I would implore you as a council to endorse, where possible, having our councillors with the wealth of experience to actually sit on those hearings. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nees.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wondered whether this is an opportunity for Bockless. I know that some other councils work cooperatively together and get assistance in processing consents. And I just wonder whether that's something that we consider, as opposed to only going out to external consultants. And I just wonder if staff could, if they have considered that, and if they could comment.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I guess we did consider the opportunity whether to reach out to our member councils or to reach out to their staff, but the regional council resource consenting requirements are probably a little bit different to what those in the local authorities are doing, and they need to be sort of familiar with the rules and aspects of our plan, and we're probably more environmentally focused. They tend to be a little bit more city and district plan focused. And I guess the other thing is they're equally as stretched at the moment. So across the country at the moment, consent planners are a really valuable resource, which are pretty hard to find.
And through you, Chair, if I could just add to what Matt has said there. We have been talking with the other territorial authorities who, as he said, are stretched, and they we've been talking about whether we can share that panel contract so that there is a single source of approved providers across the region. So rather than from a staff basis, it's the consultants with the expertise on both regional and district planning provisions, and whether we can collectively tap into that and make sure, we're hearing the concerns about costs, keeping the costs down, because the costs ultimately lie with the regional council to confirm that anything that's passed on to the applicant is acceptable. So if we've got a panel contract that confirms all of these matters have been pre-approved and all councils are comfortable of it, it's something that we can share.
So is there some interest in that from other councils?
Yes, there has been. Well, it's actually, they've reached out to us because of their own stretched staff, and there are a number of councils who you will know that the central government are very hungry for staff at the moment and are happy to have them working from districts and regions, and so they are facing the same issues that we are. Yes.
Councillor Winters.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to move the resolution on page 103, Mr. Chairman. In doing so, two things. The reason why we use consultants is often we're the applicant and we can't seem to be, we have to devolve that conflict of interest. And also we're under huge time constraints, Mr. Chairman. When applications come in and we don't have the resourcing in-house, that's when the team flick them out to these consultants to provide the peaks and troughs in terms of the workload, because you're aware under the Resource Management Act, we have certain timelines that we have to deliver applications by, and we're under strict time frames. And you will want to know why we are behind the eight ball if an application is outside our timeline. And in fact, we often give, we haven't done it in the past, very little, but we're obliged to give refunds if we're outside that timeline. So this is a smoothing the workload, Mr. Chairman, and making sure there's no conflict of interest. So I'm happy to move the recommendation on page 103. Message ends.
Thank you, Councillor Winters. Councillor Love.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my position on risk and assurance, we do look at, and I examine with Matt, the expenditure grouped together of part-time staff, full-time staff and consultants, and to make sure that we are getting the best mix and the most economic mix out of that. And what it does mean is by having the consultants, it enables us to smooth over the humps and bumps in the work programme. So I'm content that we're going ahead in the right way at the moment, and I'm happy to second the motions.
Thank you, Councillor Love. So the recommendation has been moved and seconded. Matt, could I just ask you, in terms of the procurement plan, what is the relevance of those 1 to 4 items listed under the sustainability considerations? I mean, is it just there for our information as national direction? Because I don't see much relevance at all to the delivery of the people. But anyway, you might want to get back to me about that. So
I'd say that's probably correct, dear Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So the resolution's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Right, next item is 9.6, Yvonne Tatton. So, councillors, where is Ms. Tatton? Yvonne.
Tēnā koutou, councillors. This is a procedural report. Councillor Rose, early November, tendered his resignation on 2 of the joint co-governance groups, the Rangitangi River Forum and the Tauranga Moana Advisory Group. So Council was asked to accept those resignations and also to consider whether they wish to appoint additional members onto those groups.
Okay, first question is, do we have to reappoint members? We've got 12 months to go in the triennium, or can we leave one of those, can we leave either or both of those vacant if we wish to?
You're not obliged to appoint an additional member at this point. That's up to council's discretion.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, kia ora. Very disappointed that Councillor Rhodes has actually sought to disengage from these communities, because I feel it's a missed opportunity for him to gain an experience on iwi interaction, but his call is his call. But also, the current setting, particularly on the Rangataiki River Forum, I believe that 3 councillors would be more than adequate even going forward. I mean, I would quite be happy to settle on 3 councillors into the next triennium. That's my recommendation. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Concur with Mr. Clark. I don't think it's necessary for the Rangataiki River Forum to have another representative, especially we're less than 12 months from the elections. So I think it would be difficult for that person to come up to speed very quickly in the next 12 months. And so for 3, I would, I don't see it necessary. Message ends.
Thank you. Councillor Thurston.
The question's been answered by our colleagues in terms of the Rangataiki River Forum, but I'd just like to pose the same question to our colleagues on the Tauranga Moana Advisory Group. Do they think they need added weight for the further council representative to replace who you stood down?
Councillor McDonald.
I say we probably do need a replacement on Tauranga Moana as well, because we've got myself, Jane, Paula and Norm. It'll just mean that Jane will step into the seat that was held by Stacey, because she currently sits on alternate. It'll just bring Jane to the table, but I don't think we need extra representation there either.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Neese.
Yes, thank you, Matty Moana. I was going to say I'm going to attend anyway, so if I just stop being the alternate and just step into the vacant seat, I'm quite happy to do that.
Okay, so I think, Fiona, the tenor of the meeting is that we note Councillor Rose's resignation and that we do not reappoint to that committee. We leave the committee as standing both. Because at the moment we've only got 4 on the Rangataiki River Forum, and those on the Rangataiki River Forum have a conversation with you and I in terms of the appearance that, you know, we're overrepresented, so we can run through to that. And you just want to formalise Councillor Neese being an appointee to Tauranga Moana as opposed to the alternate. Yes, Councillor Von Duddleston.
No, I was just going to say exactly that. I think we do need, although she's an alternative, we should appoint her to the committee. I mean, I personally listen in to just about all of their meetings myself, but I don't need to be on it as such. As long as we've got representation, that's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Von Duddleston. So did one of our colleagues move the resolution to accept the resignation? You did, Councillor Eaty. I'll second. So all those in favour, raise your hand. Against, carry. Thank you. 9.7 Quayside Holdings, Mr. Taylor, statement of expectation.
Good morning, Chairman and Councillors. Thank you. So first of all, thank you for the feedback that I've received from councillors since I circulated the draft of this letter earlier in the week. And with your approval, Mr. Chairman, I'll be making the following amendments for clarification to the letter to include reference to section 59 of the Local Government Act, because this provides clarity around the principal objectives of the CCCO. So I think this would be a useful addition to the letter, and also to define more clearly what a strategic asset is. This is also set out in section 5 of the Local Government Act. And yeah, I apologise for these omissions, but I'll add that clarity in the report to this draft before, with your approval, sending that to Quayside.
So thank you, Mr. Taylor. For clarity, can you just take us through the timeline? As you said, this is a draft. We now submit it to Quayside. We have a discussion with Quayside directors this afternoon. What is the timeline we're working to until their final adoption of this and the statement of intent?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the draft for your adoption today. That will be sent to Quayside following my amendments that I've discussed and any wording changes that need to be made. Then Quayside will consider it in preparation for their statement of intent. They will then send a draft statement of intent to you early in 2022, and then you will consider that statement of intent and how much it matches your letter of expectation.
Sign off, final sign off when?
Of the letter, Mr. Chairman, the statement of expectation.
And SOI.
The statement of expectation is signed off today at your meeting, and then the statement of intent is signed off by Quayside at probably at their June meeting, where you'll have a chance to feedback on their draft, which we expect to receive by the 1st of March.
Thank you, councillors. I hope that gives you clarity in terms of where we are in terms of this process. So start of a process that will end at the end of March. Did you say?
For the draft statement of intent, but their final statement of intent will be approved in June.
June.
Usually.
Okay. Any questions, councillors? Our colleagues on Zoom? No? Happy to move. Councillor Thurston has moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor MacDonald. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. 9.8. Chief Executive in the holiday break. Taking a break, are you, Fiona? Good on you. Where you going?
Yes, thank you. This is a procedural matter to get your approval for a acting chief executive. And as part of just recognising the year we've had, we do have some short videos the staff have prepared for you to recognise all the decisions that you've made. If we could take that after this paper.
Right.
Move the recommendations.
Councillor Thurston's moved the recommendation. I'll second it. Councillor Winters.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, do we have a 2IC in the background just in case something happens to Namuta? Not that anything's going to happen to Namuta, just so that we've got continuity there.
Through you, Chair, I'm actually planning on staying around because in the event that I'm required, I'll be coming back into work. It's just in these COVID times, I'm prepared to come back in.
Happy with that. Thank you. Thank you, Fiona.
Yes, thanks, Fiona. So the recommendation to appoint Namuta as acting general manager from 25th of December to 10th of January is now in front of us. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you. Public excluded.
Through you, Chair, just in terms of the year that we've had, the staff have got together and put a presentation for you just to recognise all the decisions that you have made. This has been a tremendous year for our region, and so we just got a little presentation. So on behalf of staff, thank you. You've clearly made a number of decisions this year and attended so many meetings in spite of COVID. So our thanks to you. And that was put forward by the staff in terms of what they really valued your decision making about. And we've got now a little short video drilling into one in particular.
We made good progress this year on all three of our flood wall reconstruction sites. Back in 2017, an issue was identified with seepage, where more water than desirable passes through our stop bank. We undertook an investigation and determined that sheet piling was the best remedy. Here at the Greig Road site, you can't see but beneath me is a completed section. We replaced 230 metres of stop bank, installed 235 sheet piles and used 5,000 tonnes of imported soil fill to rebuild the bank. Here we are at the East Bank Road flood wall reconstruction site, recently completed. Now let me show you what's below here. We installed 9 metre long steel sheet piles beneath the bank, which are driven into the ground and penetrated through the layers that were giving us trouble. And now those steel sheet piles are encased in a soil stop bank. Here we are at our final flood wall site, 87 to 109 College Road Edge. We are currently in the process of finalising the design with affected landowners. Some of this work has been funded by Central Government's Crown Infrastructure Fund. 2.25 million of the $5 million project came from Central Government. So there's a lot of work going on below the surface to help protect our communities in heavy rain events.
Again, staff were very pleased with the decisions you made that they could protect those communities. And the staff volunteers in making these videos are deeply appreciated in terms of the work that they want to showcase for you.
Can I just ask a question? I was interested in looking at that sheet piling, and I've always wondered about the effectiveness of stop banks, especially looking at Edgecombe. Are we reviewing the security of the stop banks at Edgecombe just to make sure we don't have another flood there in the future?
Thank you, Councillor Love. We're really delighted that of the Cullen report recommendations, we have substantially implemented all of those. And this year with the spillway, we're hoping to do that this year as well. So we're in a position where you have approved significant capital works for a number of years, and we're in the position of fully implementing those recommendations.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, councillors. That takes us to public excluded. So I'll move that we go into public excluded. Seconded, Councillor Thurston. All those in favour say aye or raise your hand. Against, carried. I'll move that we move out of public excluded. Councillor Love endorsed. So that takes us to the last agenda item, which is the late agenda item. Establish a BOPRC TCC joint committee. Who was wanting to speak to this, Fiona?
I'm happy to do so, and it's my pleasure to introduce this to you. I apologise, it's a late item, but both TCC and Bay of Plenty Regional Council elected members have talked about this and they're keen to progress this. And I see Yvonne is on the line, and I think Yvonne just wants to let you know that TCC passed a similar resolution yesterday at the extraordinary meeting. However, they did add the word public into the recommendation 2, and we'd be seeking to make that same change. Thank you.
Just to confirm, yesterday at TCC, Fiona, they passed this resolution, and the only addition they added to, which I think is the resolution in front of councillors, is they inserted the words public as opposed to the transport system. And
Chairman Leader, if I may just speak into
yes.
this. There is a difference in the resolution that TCC passed and the one that's presented to you. Tauranga City Council passed the resolution to establish the joint committee, but based on comments made by some councillors this week, the recommendation that we have here is that for council to pass it in principle following to enable further discussions to occur regarding terms of reference and specifically identifying the relationship between the Public Transport Committee. That's why the words in principle is in your recommendation.
So, Yvonne, paper that's in front of me, which I acknowledge is an old one, but under section 2, we are establishing a joint committee, name to be confirmed, of ourselves and Tauranga City Council to guide both infrastructure and service planning relevant to Tauranga's public transport system. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah, so the addition from yesterday's iteration is the word public transport system. Is there anything else we need to be made aware of before we pass this resolution?
In the resolution that was passed by Tauranga City Council, they have identified the purpose as to set the strategic and operational direction. Based on comments made, our council needs to have further conversations about ensuring that they are specific around the purpose of this committee, this joint committee. However, council may choose to adopt the same recommendation that Tauranga City has.
We certainly can't pass one that's opposed to it, so we just need some clarity around. So in looking, our councillors on Zoom, you can see the proposed resolution, and it's the one that we're concentrating is the one in red, right, Yvonne?
The one in red is a resolution that Tauranga City Council passed, which was different to the resolution which was in our report. So council can decide today that they will establish a joint committee for the purpose of setting the strategic and operational direction for an integrated public transport system for Tauranga City, or they can agree, or they may decide to agree in principle to do so and set the direction, the purpose of that committee through the terms of reference.
Well, I think for those councillors who were part of the discussion with TCC commissioners the other night, the intent to establish a joint committee is agreed. The wordsmithing in terms of whether it's strategic direction, I'll take advice from councillors on, but it's important that whatever we agree to is something we fully understand. And the second part of the resolution will be to, as an item 4 there, which we have essentially agreed, is to appoint Councillor Mondalis and Councillor Thompson to this committee to be our representatives. Fiona?
Yes, I would recommend to councillors that they adopt the same recommendation as TCC, which is the one in red on the screen, noting that we'll be coming back in February with the terms of reference for you to approve. I think it is much more practical and straightforward if you adopt the wording in red.
Thank you, Fiona. Councillor Von Duddleson, you're taking your hand down.
Yeah, Fiona's answered my question. I think the agrees in principle is flawed. I think we would be outside the intent of Tauranga City, and we must be aligned. Certainly the terms of reference can be done at a later stage. That's not an issue, but that was all. I didn't like the agrees in principle because it would put us. So I support the in red.
Thank you, Councillor Von Duddleson. Councillor Thurston.
Yeah, my understanding is that we're entering into this at a heightened level of goodwill between ourselves and TCC. But just a point of clarification, in terms of the old clause under 2, obviously we listened to the debate, or staff listened to the debate yesterday at TCC, but what was the rationale between moving it from Tauranga's transport system down to a public transport system? Another question. So why was there a desire on the part of the commissioners to narrow it down from being a review of and Tauranga's transport system down to just being a public transport system? Have you got any ideas to what they said in the debate? Their rationale behind it? Because it's been narrowed down quite considerably, as I see it.
So my understanding,
Maybe someone can
it's just my understanding, is that the inference for the wider Tauranga transport system is a much bigger brief that I think the commissioners didn't want this particular group to get into, hence confining it to the public transport system.
Okay, I'll accept that. And the other point was, in terms of the terms of reference being signed and sealed in early 2022, we have got the assurance that Councillor Von Daddleson and Councillor Thompson will be having some very high-level informal discussions prior to that. So we do. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Love and Councillor Von Daddleson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In our discussions, which we had the other evening, which I think were very fruitful, we were discussing not only the public transport system, but also the effect of how we made public transport more effective. And one of the things we were discussing was also looking at the car parking in Tauranga. And we viewed this the other night as an integrated thing to review both the car parking and the public transport system. And I see now that car parking is excluded from what is now planned, and I think that's a retrograde step.
Councillor, I wouldn't say that it was excluded. I think in terms of the public transport system, it could well be included in that brief. That may well be a consideration in terms of the understanding of what is the strategic direction of the car parking system, because you were party to the conversation that said from a TCC's perspective that was one of the issues they needed to get their heads around. I don't think it's specifically excluded.
But private car parking can never be public transport. So all I would say is hopefully we note that issue, and when we come to the terms of reference, we make sure that it is in fact included.
That's fine. Councillor Von Daddleson.
Yeah, Commissioner Tolley made it very clear that the parking strategy is an integral part of public transport decision making. They go hand in hand, and I think we're getting a little bit tied up in the words. The intention is there, the goodwill's there. We will work on the terms of reference. I actually agree with it to put public transport system, because otherwise, you've got to remember they do a lot of roads around the city that is not going to be the responsibility of this committee at all. So I don't think there's anything wrong with adding the word public to the transport system, and it doesn't preclude the parking strategy. She's made that very clear. Terms of reference will include it. So there is a high level of goodwill established, and let's work on it and get this through.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston.
Yeah, I just repeat earlier comments I made that I've got huge faith in Councillor Von Daddleson and Councillor Thompson that in these informal high-level discussions that they will have leading up to the terms of reference being signed in 2022, that a lot of these issues broader than just the public transport system will be woven into their discussion. So go for it, you two. You have my full support.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston. And I would have to say that whilst some may consider this a leap of faith, I don't think it is. What we both acknowledge is that the status quo, modus operandi in terms of public transport between the two entities is not an option. And this is a pragmatic way forward in trying to get some resolution to resolving those issues. So Councillor Crosby.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I support the amended resolution, including the word public transport. That's our swim lane that we've been told to stick to. And I generally do hope that this would create better alignment as we move forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson, do you want to make some concluding comments? Seeing you're in the, no, you're happy. Okay, councillors, just to be clear, the resolution is of 4 parts. So we're replacing subset 2 with the writing in red there, which essentially is just putting in place public transport system. There's a bit of a change in terms of, what was it? Anyway, it's up there for us all to see, set the strategic and operational director and integrated public transport system for Tauranga City. In terms of reference, we confirmed first council meeting in 22, and we're agreeing to appoint Councillor Von Duddleston, Councillor Paula Thompson as our representatives to that joint committee. Do I have a move?
Happy to move, Chair.
Happy to move, Councillor Thurston. Seconded, Councillor Nees. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against? Carried. Thank you, councillors. So that brings us to the end of our council meeting. So, councillors, that Yvonne.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I just need to bring you back to the item of the councillor resignation. And from a procedural point of view, we do need a resolution to appoint Councillor Nees to the Tauranga Advisory Group. That got missed.
No, I thought we did. My understanding was that we did.
In listening to the decision, it was just to accept the resignation. So I just need a resolution to appoint Councillor Nees.
Sorry, through the chair, and what I noted was that new resolution 3 will not reappoint a replacement to RRF or TMAG for the remainder of the 2019-2022 triennium. And resolution 4 notes that Councillor Jamie Nees will become a formal member of TMAG rather than the current role as an alternate. Is that sufficient?
Thank you. I'm just aware in terms of the recording of our meetings that that did not come through clearly. So thank you.
That's what the minutes are going to say, because that's what my understanding was. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Right, thank you, councillors. For those on Zoom and who were able to attend last night's meal with us, your absence was noted, and in my closing remarks, I noted my appreciation to each and every one of you for getting through a rather difficult year this year. Unfortunately, I think the next 6 months going forward probably will offer some similar challenges. But in concluding, I just wish you all a Merry Christmas and hopefully a prosperous new year. And once again, thank you for your diligence, your professionalism in terms of running this organisation on behalf of the people of Toi Moana. So have a good festive season and thank you once again. And I noted the congratulations to staff for those who weren't there last night as well. So thank you, and we will sign off. Ki te anō.